Hi again. Nelson Barbour dealing with the parable of the 10 virgins, giving a detailed application to the Millerite disappointment from 1843-44 forward. And he goes on. Many arguments are given in this book proving that we are now in the time of harvest, hence that Christ has come the second time, and that he was due in the autumn of 1874, his appearing in the clouds being yet future. From the 7th month in 1844 to the 7th month in 1874 was 30 years. The first movement brought to view in this parable, and which was to end in disappointment and the tarrying of the bridegroom, ended in 1844. And all the evidences proving that Christ was due in 1874 also prove that this night of tarrying was one of just 30 years. Hence, if this parable is to be accurately applied in every detail, as Christ himself has taught us to apply parables, the midnight cry, and at midnight there was a cry made, should have occurred 15 years after the 1844 disappointment, or in the middle of this night of 30 years. Therefore, of course, doing the calculation, you'd have to say 1859. Now, whether it was accidental or so overruled, this present movement, based on these arguments proving that he was due in 1874, began just at that point of time, that is 15 years after 1844. Hence we have to believe the midnight cry has been given, and that the parable is now nearly complete. No one can read this parable in the light of present truth, that is, that we are at the end of the gospel age, and not see a fitness of the parable to these two movements, the first before the tarrying, and therefore ending in disappointment, the second, or midnight cry, ending with the coming of the bridegroom, and even the division named in the parable. And while they were gone, the bridegroom came, and they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. And afterwards came also the other virgins, saying, Open to us. All have a fulfillment, since one part of those who have represented this movement fail of seeing the light in this latter message. In other words, remain in darkness as to the evidences of his coming, and turn away from the investigation of that which first led them to go out and meet the bridegroom. He seems to be saying that the Millerites fell away and they didn't keep up with what he calls in this paragraph present truth. That is the present truth that Barbour and Russell are now publicizing. How that the prophecy could in this respect have a more perfect fulfillment we cannot imagine, and even something of the manner of his coming is implied in the fact that the foolish virgins appear not to have known when the bridegroom came, since they were absent. In the application of a prophecy, we do not expect it to take such a character that those who are inclined to oppose can find nothing to say against it. If it is fulfilled in such a way that one who is trying to see it will fit, can see that the facts and the prophecy harmonize, that is the most we have a right to expect. There was not one single prophecy fulfilled at the first advent in such a way that its opposers could take no exception to it. And yet its friends ought to be able to see a complete and satisfactory fitness. Now, if anyone will take the position that this Advent movement has been the counterpart of this parable, and try and see if the 1843 movement prior to the disappointment does not fill the parable from verse 1 to 5, and if this last movement, which began in the middle of this 30 years of tarrying, cannot be made to fill the latter part, we think they will be successful. I do not mean to say that if you pretend to take a friendly view of these things, while yet really in heart opposing them, you will be able to see. If you love the appearing of Christ, you cannot help wishing that these things were true, whether they are or not. Now then, begin in that way, hoping that they are true, and then search, and you will not have long to wait before seeing light and beauty in these things. So now the Midnight Cry movement has got another date to make somehow part of prophecy, and that's the date 1859. All this has been totally abandoned, and of course it all is based on the idea of not only the year-day theory, but also the parousia doctrine, which is another false teaching that Barbour and Russell gave to Jehovah's Witnesses. The idea of an invisible presence. So we've done a document on the parousia before, so I'll put a link into that.